Hello, dear friends. How are you? I hope I find you all in good health and safe and sound. Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Mario Theriger, and today I would like to keep you company with another subject. You see, I'm on the move, lots of things to make and to do and to prepare. It's a bit chaotic, so I would like to take the opportunity to talk just a little bit about chaos magic, more on a sort of historical perspective of it, how it originated, right? You see, I have noticed nowadays that chaos magic in general isn't what it used to be, but such is the nature of all things, right? Everything changes, everything evolves, and chaos itself is an important part of change that avoids stagnation, and as such, it allows everything to continue to change and to shape and adapt to the ever-flowing changes of the universe. But when it comes to the magical arts, right, the very thing that makes everything sound the exact same and becomes very dull and uninteresting, which eventually leads people to quit, is precisely conformity. Submission to agreed upon ideas and being afraid to explore, either because we fear to be wrong or to fail, or because someone else's opinion and experience becomes canon, and so we feel like we must follow the same guidelines, otherwise it won't work for us or it won't even be accepted. That's precisely where we fail in a variety of things in life, of course, but including in the magical arts. As I said here many times before on other videos concerning witchcraft, well, in my opinion, of course, witchcraft is not meant to be pleasant. It's meant to be liberating. And I believe the same line of thought can be applied to any other type of magic, or just to magic in general. It's always about experimentation. And it seems to me that's what chaos magic originally meant to express. Sorcery becomes an experimental activity. Unfortunately, even in chaos magic, experimentation reached its limits, it seems, the moment people labeled it chaos magic, have given a label to it and transformed it into a practice. And we see many people, especially nowadays, sharing their thoughts on chaos magic as in how it all works. It has already been stipulated how it works and how to practice, precisely becoming yet another path that has reached its limits the very moment there's conformity, an agreed upon idea and a stipulated practice, and so people stop experimenting. But not all have stopped. So unlike, for instance, Wicca and Thelema and such other New Age magical practices and spiritualities that are based on religions with set rules and values, chaos magic began in the opposite direction. It rejected the existence of absolute truth and views other occult traditions based on symbol systems that are effective purely because of the practitioner's beliefs. So chaos magic, instead of departing from the premise of the belief that magic exists or in the belief of the existence of a supernatural force, chaos magic has taken a rather agnostic approach, right? So the practice is sometimes referred to as success magic or results-based magic, as it leans on the idea that practitioners should simply use what works, belief itself being a tool for achieving desired results. It is here that lies the importance of experimenting. You only achieve any successful result if it works, and when it works, you keep on using it, but to reach this, you must experiment. It isn't clear where the term chaos magic initially came from. An interesting reading is, of course, Peter J. Carroll's books Liber Null and Psychonaut, where he stated that the name chaos is virtually meaningless and free from the anthropomorphic ideas of religion, and chaos here kind of replaced the idea of a god and a given name to a divine figure as a central conception to a religious belief. Therefore, chaos becomes this sort of force, presence, existential factor in life without giving a particular identity to it. Therefore, it helps not to be bound to a preconceived idea, which therefore would limit our approach to spirituality itself, but instead it becomes a broader conception which allows more freedom to approach the spiritual, right? Unless, of course, I misunderstood the message. Well, it is quite possible. It happens sometimes. Anyway, most magical traditions, including, as I said, Wicca, Thelema, Kabbalah as well, and the systems based on the Golden Dawn's practices, work towards bringing about change through beliefs, rituals, attitudes, moral codes, and a conceptual model of the universe. But chaos magic started off as a need to strip magic down to its basics, leaving only the techniques used to affect change. So in this practice, a belief in the supernatural isn't necessary. In fact, the whole point is to avoid belief influencing practice. But the practice still includes a series of general principles, often referred to as a pick and mix or DIY approach. As such, chaos magicians are often drastically different to what we are mostly used to hear and to see when it comes to new age or modern age spiritualities and magical practices, of course. So in this approach to magic, practitioners put a lot of emphasis on results-based magic, also making each practitioner drastically different from each other, to the point where authors of chaos magic often encourage readers to invent their own styles and methods. So, in truth, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter much how one person practices magic or their approach to the practice itself, as the point is experimentation and finding what it works and leads to the intended result. So chaos magic therefore becomes the polar opposite of an exact art. Most practitioners operate under the attitude of, if it works, use it. So the defining doctrine of chaos magic, and I do realize that implying a doctrine already may give the wrong impression, but nevertheless, what defines it is the idea, or as some put it, rather the meta-belief that belief is a tool for achieving effects. So practitioners of chaos magic usually view systems like the Kabbalah, astrology, and the I Ching merely as symbolic and linguistic constructs that don't actually contain any absolute or objective truth. Instead, the beliefs of these systems can be manipulated to achieve certain ends, a stance as a sort of a rejection of all fixed models of reality. In short, nothing is actually true or even real if everything is permitted. It's sort of like if art is indeed subjective and everything can be art, then nothing is art because there's no standards. And so art becomes meaningless. This is anarchy, this is disorder, confusion, and not chaos. Chaos has its objective, right? It exists to determine continuity, but avoiding the existence of stagnation, but also separates what's obsolete from what still has something to contribute. And the influences on this standpoint stem from a number of sources, of course, and philosophies and magical systems, but perhaps most notably is Osman Spare, an English artist and occultist born in 1886, who became interested in occultism during his early years. You see, Osman believed that belief itself was a form of psychic energy that could easily become locked up in rigid belief structures. He attempted to break down those structures and then direct the free belief into new objectives. It's from Osman that comes the term Kia, right? He liked to use symbols as a means to communicate desire to what he called Kia. And it's actually his development of sigils and his work involving sigils that became a key influence in the chaos magic movement during the 20th century and other New Age movements, spiritual movements, and New Age religions, and still used and studied today. So this Kia, as he called it, of course, is a kind of universal mind that includes individual human consciousness via the passage of consciousness. So these desires can grow into obsessions if there is enough free belief to feed them and culminate into magical results that occur in reality. Other authors, such as the previously mentioned Peter J. Carroll, borrowed Osman's model and altered it slightly and used Kia to refer to the consciousness of the individual with the more general universe force called chaos. So the use of the term chaos has led to obviously countless misunderstandings for decades, with non-practitioners of chaos magic presuming chaos magic to be or to do with literal chaos and disorder or the gods of chaos. And this actually reminds me of a conversation I have had just a couple of months ago with my girlfriend. We were precisely talking about how in modern magical systems, particularly some labeled as chaos magic, or rather people on Instagram and TikTok and other social media networks who call themselves chaos magicians and chaos sorcerers and chaos witches, which use anything or absolutely everything as magical objects and charms, and even literally venerating Pokemons and other anime figures and as deities and as magical objects or as conduits to magic. I mean, one of the important premises of chaos magic is indeed, if it works, you keep on using it, right? However, it's not just the fact that people are, I think they are completely forgetting the other important aspects of chaos magic, which is, for instance, shifting the thought from belief in specific deities and giving them names, but rather using chaos as a meaningless conception free from the physical representations of religion and conceptions of divine, because as said before, in chaos magic, rather than devote belief to a particular god or entity, practitioners treat belief itself as a conceptual tool that they use. But it's also the fact that if everything can be used as a tool for magic and for spiritual purposes, then nothing is indeed useful and nothing actually works, and people are just living in some sort of psychosis and not actually finding what truly works and using it. So this new approach is not chaos, it is anarchy and confusion. So indeed, many people who label themselves nowadays as chaos magicians, chaos sorcerers and sorceresses, or chaos witches, do have an approach that has nothing to do with the actual, let's say, original chaos magic. Because in this seemingly disorderly and anarchic presumption that may arise from simply hearing the term chaos magic, this system in itself, on the contrary, is structured to understand chaos as consciousness used to achieve an objective rather than a completely meaningless random approach for the sake of perhaps to gain attention and to be edgy. So, since the conception of Osman and Carroll's definitions, chaos practitioners, chaos magic practitioners, have insisted that the basic operating process of chaos magic can be explained in different ways. It's more of a psychological model in which the magician uses symbols to condition their unconsciousness to achieve their goals, and an energy model directing one's own energy towards a goal, and with an informational model one that achieves a goal by transmitting information to an underlying matrix or field. So it's not at all random, but going from point A to point B with an objective and using tools to achieve that objective. As with other forms of magic, chaos magic involves its own specific range of practices, and as chaos magic leans heavily on experimentation, it's all about stripping down the magical techniques and incorporating different practices from different traditions, from thelemic rituals and Wiccan rites to energy healing, to see what works, right? Just to see, it's an experimentation, to see what works. But of course, obviously, a few different practices have been developed over time, specifically for chaos magic, because successfully executing a magical act is dependent on bypassing the conscious mind. The Gnostic state, or Gnosis, is used to do this and describes the unaltered state of consciousness that occurs when a person's mind is fixed on one point, thought, or goal. So I have mentioned sigils, especially as a practice developed by Osman Spare, which is still used today in chaos magic and other practices. Sigils are also regularly referred to when practicing this art, right? With practitioners using them to write out intentions and then entering the Gnostic state to launch the sigil. After charging the sigil, it is necessary to repress all memory of it. And it's actually interesting to notice that during the medieval times, actually late Middle Ages and mostly well into the modern period, sigils were symbols associated with particular angels or demons and used to summon them. And this goes in line with what I've said many times here before on other previous videos concerning, for instance, as an example, Icelandic magic staves as a sigil-based system of magic from the 16th century onwards, which precisely continues with the tradition of sigils in continental Europe from the Renaissance onwards, as symbols that regularly summon or bind a particular entity in order to help to achieve a particular magic objective in sorcery. And this is one of the main reasons why perhaps many people misinterpret Icelandic magic staves, galdrastafir, as the surviving magical practices of pre-Christian Scandinavia, pre-Christian pagan belief systems of Scandinavia, because sometimes it contains the names of old Nordic gods. But as said here before, Icelandic magic staves followed the medieval conception of sigils as symbols to summon and control angels and demons and other entities. And the names of Nordic gods in Galdrastafir, the Icelandic magic staves, is not because these occultists and sorcerers were still pagan or paganism survived in some underground groups or passed from generation to generation within some families. No. Nordic gods became names of power to be invoked through these sigils alongside names of God, Christ, other biblical figures, angels, and demons. So in the Galdrastafir, we are not dealing with a pagan tradition or the survival of a pagan tradition, but rather the sigils and other symbols in this modern Icelandic tradition present a fundamental notion of the Christian religious tradition and especially the magical tradition of Catholicism itself, which is the universe, or rather the cosmological presupposition, right, or worldview underlying these beliefs in Galdrastafir is Christian, implying the existence of good and evil as distinct entities and the individual's capacity to act to change the course of events, for better or for worse, invoking the power of God or the devil or entities seen as good and others as evil. So this dualistic view is typically Christian. You see, Norse mythology, which I recall reached us filtered by Christian compilers, reveals a very, very different worldview. good and evil are not absolutes, events follow in a cyclical course, and destiny is a force above the gods themselves. And this is not what we see in the sorcery involved in the creation of Icelandic sigils and magical symbols. The Church, especially the Catholic Church, generally did not deny the existence of the specific deities, gods and goddesses of the religions it imposed itself on, but simply attributed them to a demonic nature, right? You see? The range of demons that could be invoked, therefore, also included ancient pagan deities. This does not imply that pagan beliefs survived. On the contrary, it attests to the effective demonization of pagan gods, stripping them of their divine status and turning them into demons who, in turn, continue to be names of power invoked for magical acts, thus becoming fallen angels. So this is important to mention, since we are talking about sigils, because this tradition continues to this day, including very much in chaos magic, where many names, even of pagan gods, are included. And although, of course, with New Age spiritualities and religions and with the neo-pagan movement, ancient deities are now invoked with a sort of a neo-pagan mindset and not strictly as demons and negative forces that influence magic. Nevertheless, this tradition has reached us through Christian dualistic concepts. So when dealing with the history of magical sigils, we must always keep in mind that these are systems very much influenced and created by Christianity since the Renaissance onwards. So the entire premise of creating a sigil is that through a pattern and names invoked, the sorcerer has control of what is called upon. By naming something, you have power over it. However, Osman's pair entirely altered the practice of sigils, arguing that supernatural beings were simply complexes in the unconscious and could be created through sigilization, the creation of sigils. The practice of using sigils has since been expanded by practitioners of chaos magic by creating extended works of art with magical meanings and with very power and willpower created through sigilization. So this goes in line with the main approach of chaos magic, the DIY approach, in which practitioners are even encouraged to incorporate pop culture into their magic alongside magical systems. It's not so much the method as the intention that matters. It's more like personal symbolism is the most important thing. And it allows practitioners to adopt any symbols and ideas that they feel are relevant or resonate with them. So the use of pop culture references became quite popular within the chaos magic community during the 1990s and the early 2000s. Over time, the overlap between pop culture and chaos magic broadened. Hence, we ended up having sort of two main approaches as a collective. People either using any sort of character and conception from Pokemons to cartoon characters and other pop culture figures, and thus everything, absolutely everything, becomes a tool for magic. Therefore, there's a total construction of a meaningless nature to it, which I think dangerously and more often than not does not create a conscious and rational perception towards magic, and people enter into a personal psychosis because boundaries are not set, and instead people step further away from the structure of chaos into total anarchy. Or there's a different approach to chaos magic followed by the influence of neo-paganism as well, which is chaos magic practitioners started adopting older traditions following the realization that imaginary gods and fictional characters maybe don't seem to have the same predictable effects as traditional ones. more closely following the original thoughts and philosophy of chaos magic, which is putting to practice what is already known to work through experimentation, of course. But, of course, this can lead to other arguments and a totally different video on the creation of egregores, the esoteric concept that an entity, an energy, even a deity can be created and arise through the collective thoughts of a distinct group of people. For example, considering chaos magic and what was said here before as an example, if a specific Pokemon is collectively understood as a deity and the successive collective action of rituals and other activities is channeled towards that Pokemon with a spiritual intention, then an egregore is formed and that Pokemon becomes a manifestation to be invoked for magical and spiritual purposes. So this approach to the spiritual is indeed valid and is also seen in animistic societies, actually, as well as in chaos magic, especially nowadays. However, here I think we walk a very fine line between falling into psychosis or truly achieving knowledge of finding a tool that works and therefore we will continue to use, even if it seems strange or inappropriate to others, and quite strange to others. But this is a more delicate matter, I think. In fact, I think some rationalism is necessary. Spirituality without rationalism is not spirituality, but rather a psychosis that can easily turn into a cult in the sense of a sect, right? And actively be harmful to those who follow it. There is no faith without doubt, because doubt keeps us rational and is the factor that determines faith and what is truly a spiritual experience, and creates this separation between what is truly a spiritual experience from what is psychosis or pure coincidence. This is the importance of belief becoming a conceptual tool, right? Because it frees people from preconceived ideas of the religious and the spiritual, allowing people to broaden their spiritual and magical approaches. But without the rational side of it, people can quickly lose their grasp on it and insanity takes hold. Anyway, dear friends, I do hope you have enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, and as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.